Today we went over homework for prep, and I want to revisit a few important points to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So here's our data. It's our raw data. We've got our different retailers listed here: Gemini, Cousins, Legals, Fresh and Better, and Greens. And so for homework number 4, you're going to do email 3 of the final project. So first step in getting this assignment accomplished is you're going to need to calculate shares. So these are volume shares for each retailer. And by shares, we need to calculate the revenue shares. So how do we calculate revenue for each retailer? We're going to create a new variable where we're multiplying the price times the quantity. This is what we did in class today. So we did the Gemini, Cousins, Legals, Fresh and Better, and our final retailer Greens revenue. What we also did in class is calculate our shares for each of these retailers. And to calculate the shares for each of these retailers, we take the revenue for that retailer and divide it by the market volume. So for that, we have a column from our data that we renamed in the lab as market underscore V. And this is, you can think of the market volume as the total size of the pie of the market. So this is how much is coming in the milk market. And this is how we get the share values. So, right, so for each one of these shares, we have for Cousins and Legals, a fraction between their revenue and the total market volume. All right, so for HHI, HHI is our sum of squared shares. So if we look back to our lecture notes here, our HHI is the sum of squared shares, where N is the number of firms in the market. And what we want to do is one other step. We have the 5 retailers. We need to create another all other share, because the HHI is the sum of squared shares for all firms in the market. So this last column here, these last 2 columns, will be what is considered the other retailers, not accounted for by the 5 that we have in our raw data. So how we did that is we take the total market volume, which is column Z for me, and I subtract the sum of all the volume from the other retailers. So this gives me the remaining slice of the pie not accounted for by the other 5 retailers. To calculate the share of the other retailers, I simply divide that value that I just created by the total market value. And so I get my all other market share. Then from there, we have enough information to calculate our HHI. So I go into my spreadsheet and I look for all of my share columns. So H, L, P, T, X, and AB. And I sum the squares of each of those shares. So H squared, L squared, P squared, T squared, X squared, AB squared. And I multiply that by 10,000. I understand in class I mentioned 1,000. If you did that, that's fine. But just for consistency of our notes, I'm going to multiply it by 10,000. So HHI ranges from 0, which is perfect competition, to 10,000, which is a monopoly. And importantly, these thresholds tell us how concentrated that market is. So part of your homework is to describe what these values mean in the context of the example of the milk revenues for these 5 retailers. This is HHI. Okay, so we have the sum of squared shares, we multiply it by 10,000, and we have our value there. Next, you're asked to calculate the CR2 and the CR4. In order to do this, you need what's called the large function. This is a function that's in Excel. And what we're going to do to prep for that is we're going to have to move all of our share columns so that they're next to each other, because the large function takes an array, and an array needs to be set a series of columns that are adjacent to each other. So I'm going to highlight the columns that I want to move. I'm going to cut those and move them over to towards the end of this Excel worksheet in the same order that they show up. So then I'll move legals. I'll move fresh and better. And if you're working on a Mac, it'll be a little bit different, but what your objective is to move these share values, these share columns, so that they're all adjacent to each other. Because what you'll need to do next is for CR2, you're going to use that large function. So what is CR2? What is CR4? So these are going to be our concentration ratios. They're the cumulative share of the K largest firms in the market. So we're doing 2 and 4. So we take the first largest firm plus the second largest firm for CR2. For CR4, we take the top 4 largest firms. And to find the top 4 largest firms for 50 some odd rows, so right, we're working with about 57 rows, it would be very tedious to have to go row by row and find which is the largest firm. Excel, you can use the large function, and we're going to feed it the set of 5 retailers, just the 5, and we want it to find the largest firm, and then we want it to find the second largest firm because it's CR2. Change 1 to 2, and this is my formula, and my CR is 0.46. I can double click this green box and the remaining rows will be filled in. And then what I can do is I can copy this formula, press escape, activate my AG2 cell for CR4, paste that, and complete this formula by adding large 3 and large 4. Okay, so now we get 0.77, which makes sense, right? Because we would expect that the CR2 is going to be smaller, the portion of the market that's occupied, or the portion of the market that's owned by the top 2 firms should be smaller than the portion of the market that's occupied by the top 4 firms. So I double click my green box and I'm able to see here that that's in fact true. CR2 and CR4. CR2 is smaller than CR4. That's a good gut check. So now I have my HHI, my CR2, and my CR4. So now I have all of my data points. I have them enough here to plot, and I'm again having to plot my HHI, which is the sum of squared shares times 10,000, my CR2, and my CR4.